Hello, everybody out there, you beautiful, beautiful baseball fans. Welcome once again to another episode of Alley Talk here on Philly Sports Network. I am your host, Kyle Fisher, as I am every week except for last week. I know we took the week off. Appreciate everybody's patience. We're going to figure out our off-season schedule soon. However, in the meantime, we are back to talk all about the end-of-season press conference from both Dave Dombrowski and manager Rob Thompson. We're here back to talk about all the rumors and speculation and false narratives being put out there about Bryce Harper potentially being on the trade block. We'll talk about some of the Boris comments that he made to MLB.com and Todd Zalecki, beat reporter for MLB.com for the Phillies. And we will talk about some other interesting baseball things happening tonight. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that the World Series begins tonight. So we'll be talking about that very briefly with a focus on the Phillies. One, could you have seen them playing in this spot based on how the rest of the postseason went? And also, are there any potential targets out there for a team that likes to spend money every year in the Dodgers? They have some free agents coming off the books who potentially could be available among that group. So we'll be here to talk all things baseball, all things Phillies. We are here to talk about it all. And we appreciate you guys joining us for the ride. Just as a reminder, if you want to hop in the comments, we always love going back and forth with folks here in the comments, whether you're watching us on YouTube or you're watching us on social media. Make sure you give us a follow. Make sure you give us your comments and what you want us to talk about so we can drive the show in the direction that you all best see fit. Appreciate the love, and let's get right into it. Another disappointing end to the season for the Philadelphia Phillies as the World Series is set to start tonight. Philadelphia Phillies fans across the country, unfortunately, have their focus pointed in other directions, whether that's the upcoming Eagles game or the upcoming Sixers game, or whether it is looking forward, if you're only a baseball nut, looking forward to the offseason like we are here today. A lot of things to get into, and a lot of important decisions for these Phillies to make this offseason. We have some big names hitting the free agency. The big slugger, Kyle Schwarber, career high in home runs. He is a free agent for the first time in 4 years. Ranger Suarez, the elastic lefty, if you will. He was pitched wonderfully in the postseason for the Phillies the past 4 seasons. He is also set to hit free agency. He seems like the odd man out. We're going to take a look at what that might look like and potential replacements if the Phillies aren't able to bring him back. And then, of course, the captain on the field, maybe not always in the clubhouse, but the captain on the field, one of the fearless leaders of the Philadelphia Phillies clubhouse, the catcher, JT Realmuto. He may not be the best catcher in baseball anymore when it comes to all-around game, but he is an elite game caller, an elite defender, and still strong enough offensively, as we saw in the second half, to do what needs to be done. Maybe not $25 million worth, but nobody thinks he's going to get paid that again. He is gone, and he is the leader of that rotation, both on and off the field. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. Other free agents that the Phillies have to consider, excuse me, the Phillies, where are they? I'm going to pull them up real quick. Hang on one second. I know that guys like Max Kepler is going to be a free agent. We have, obviously, Joe Ross, who was released. David Robertson was only a partial one-year deal. Jordan Romano will be a free agent. And then you have two guys who the club still has to make decisions on. Jose Alvarado with a $9 million club option. Even with the suspension, his expected market value is going to be a little bit higher than that. So that seems like a no-brainer that he'll be back. For the purposes of today's stream, I'm going to assume that Jose Alvarado is back at the back end of that bullpen, and he will be partnering with Johan Duran as far as shutting down opposing lineups at the end of games all season long. So just to get that out of the way now, I'm going to assume that Jose Alvarado is back. Harrison Bader, there's a question. The Phillies basically got the best 2 months of his career offensively. He's always been seen as a decent offensive contributor. Maybe not anything to write home about, but he's been a solid offensive contributor throughout his career, no matter where he's going. And on the flip side, everybody knows how elite his defense is. He has one of the best gloves in center field in all of baseball, and he is somebody who a lot of people feel the Phillies should consider bringing back because of not only that defense, but also his vibe and the way that he contributed to this team down the stretch. It feels like a no-brainer that he should be back. However, he has a mutual option, so he and the Phillies both have to agree to bring him back for one more season. I just want to take a look. I've been using Sport Rack. They're great to look at contracts and salaries and the way that contracts work. I've learned a lot for all sports viewing their website. Not an ad, just go check them out. Excuse me. If you want to get some more detailed information on contracts. Harrison Bader, again, has a $10 million mutual option. It is, I forget what the exact number is, but it is almost non-existent, the amount of times that a player has picked up their portion of the mutual option. It's usually that the player underperforms enough that they do not want to, that the club doesn't want to bring them back at that number, or that the player outperforms that number and they want to opt out so they can test free agency again. Bader right now at 31 years old, I believe he'll be, his age 32 season. He turns 32 in June next year. So maybe he has matured physically and you can have a couple, maybe a full season of significant offense like he had this year. He actually had one of his better offensive seasons prior to the trade as well. So that is something to consider. Maybe he is just getting a little bit bigger, getting a little bit more mature physically at age 31, 32, kind of when you're in your traditional prime years. And then it starts to kind of, production typically goes down a little bit from there, especially in this post-steroid era. So we'll talk about that a little bit later with the comments on Bryce Harper as well. Excuse me. But looking at Bader, the one thing to consider with Harrison Bader is he does fit the clubhouse well. You do have an option to play center field in Brandon Marsh or the young gun Justin Crawford. Neither one of them seems to be the best fit in center field. They both seem to be better in the corners. So what that means, I don't know. And then you have to consider what happens with the rest of the Phillies outfield. They will have Nick Castellanos is under contract for one more season. Are they able to move that contract even if they're buying a lot? And what that looks like for a financial impact, I'm not really sure. But the market value that I'm seeing on Bader's contract on Sport Rack is a 2-year, $20 million deal, which is right in line with his current option. My guess is that he opts out because you have to do that by a certain, I believe it's it's like 10 days after that. I know that the exclusive free agency period is 5 days after the end of the World Series. I don't know when the options have to be decided on, but I believe it's a few days after that. I will try and find out by the end of the show, or if anybody in the comments knows, Roddy's out. I see you chiming in, Alex, if you happen to know when that deadline is. My MLB The Show history of running through franchises, I don't really remember that date, but I know the exclusive negotiation period for the free agents is the first 5 days. So I guess if he opts out prior to whenever that period starts, in theory, he would be part of that exclusive free agent negotiation period. But for now, he has that option, and it'll be a $10 million deal. It's, again, kind of in line with his with what the expected market value is. Now, I take everything from Sport Rack with a grain of salt because there's some numbers that I see, and I'd be stunned if that's all that was received. We'll get into it in more significant detail shortly, but looking at, just as an example, like Kyle Schwarber, his estimated market value is 4 years and less than $100 million. I highly doubt someone will give him less than $100 million to come sign there. Maybe it's with a fifth year, who knows, but going into his age 33 season, I believe he turns 33 next season. I'd be surprised if someone gave him 5 years, but over that $100 million threshold seems like a no-brainer to me. So again, this is not a perfect science. Nobody can predict it perfectly. I know that MLB Trade Rumors does a wonderful job with their predictions on arbitration numbers. I haven't seen what they've predicted as far as contracts are concerned, but again, looking at just to have a reference, we're going to be using Sport Rack the rest of the way. And again, they have him projected as a 2-year, $20 million guy. So in theory, if he were to opt out, you could, if that's what he goes for, you could bring him back at basically the same value. My only thought on Bader that could be interesting, and again, I think it would be foolish for him to opt in just because you do get yourself more guaranteed money. But if, say, he were interested in signing a 1-year prove it deal before he loses a chance to really get one more big contract. In theory, if he thinks the market value for that is going to be roughly 10 million, maybe he stays with a team that has World Series aspirations. If that's kind of what he thinks the market is going to dictate is 10 mil, maybe he comes back at that and kind of treats it like a 1-year prove it deal. That would be a surprise just based on the history of what happens with these mutual options. But again, that's just kind of thinking outside the box. What if they wanted to, or what if he wanted to do a 1-year prove it? And if he thinks he's going to get around 10 million on that 1-year prove it anyway, then why not come back to a team that you're already familiar with? It would be interesting to see him come back. I know that I said I'm going to touch on him a little bit later. Again, the $10 million deal, it's interesting. He had a pretty decent season overall, but with the Phillies specifically, he had a nice little run after getting traded over. He slashed 305 with a 361 on base and a 463 slug, 16 RBIs in just 200 plate appearances with the Phillies. I think that him coming back would be huge. I don't know if you see another offensive season like this, but stabilizing the middle of that defense might be worth paying whatever it costs alone. He's been so good defensively, and this is a team that has really struggled to find a consistent leader of that outfield, especially if you're not confident in Justin Crawford to play center field every day. I think that Harrison Bader makes a lot of sense to come back to this squad. And I'd be curious what those listening think, but I think that Harrison Bader coming back seems like a no-brainer. You may not get the same offensive production, but again, that stability in center field, if it's a 3-year, $45 million deal, you're going like 15 mil a season. You could even have it backloaded so that you're paying a little bit less in that final year in case he needs to shift to the corners. But I think that with his glove alone, whatever he gives you offensively would be a bonus. If you can get him, 2 years at 12 a year, maybe 12 and a half a year, with a third vesting option, something along those lines, I think that would be a smart move for the Phillies. Again, stabilizing center field is a huge deal. They haven't had a center fielder there since Shane Victorino, really, that I would say you could rely on every single day. Odubel Herrera tried out there, and I just didn't think that was ever going to work. Ben Revere didn't work out there. Brandon Marsh has proven that maybe that's not where he's best suited. Johan Rojas, obviously probably a quad A guy at this point. He's still very young, so has potential to continue to grow. But at this moment right now, the Phillies need to think a little bit bigger. And I'm not sure if Harrison Bader is going to be the guy to get you there. Again, best offensive season of his career outside of 2021. He had a 4.1 WAR, 4.2 WAR total last year. But some rather average seasons mixed in. He set a career high in home runs this season. His 24 doubles was the highest of his career. 124 hits was the most of his career. So definitely a career season, a career 247 hitter who hit 277 in 2025, split between the Twins and the Phillies. So take that with a grain of salt. I think that he's likely to be a league average hitter. He has a 96 OPS plus in his career. So I think if you're hovering around 100 OPS, but you're getting solid play out of center field and you're not paying that much for a guy who's going to be another veteran leader, especially if some of these veterans leave, not bad to have. He definitely has the swagger to play in this city. He has the swagger to play for a championship team. He's been to the playoffs with the Mets and the Yankees and the Cardinals in the past. So I think that he's a solid addition if they bring him back. But again, the main thing you have to think about is, yes, he had a very impressive 2-month run with the Phillies, and they may have been the best 2 months of his career. So just keep that in mind. He's basically been a career average hitter with a great glove out in center field. So what that looks like at age 32, I don't know. We'll have to see how it plays out. But he's a Gold Glove winner. He finished highly in Rookie of the Year candidacy, but only that one Gold Glove back in 2021. He's bounced around a little bit since then. Is that a guy who's going to be a huge contributor? Excuse me, a huge contributor on a championship caliber team? I'm not sure. They have some other things that they need to figure out first, though. Like the big guy, like big Kyle Schwarber. So the next two people that I'm going to talk about kind of go hand in hand, but we're talking about a middle of the order that kind of finds itself in flux at the moment. So you had at various times over the last couple of years, batting fourth in the lineup, you've had Nick Castellanos. Well, he's in the last year of his career, coming off maybe the worst season of his career. He's paid $20 million, and my assumption is that once again they will attempt to trade him in the offseason. And what that looks like, I mean, they may pull a Mets and just, hey, we're willing to take all of his contract. We're willing to pay all of his contract to get something back, and I'm sure that you can figure out ways to benefit what's payroll versus cash on hand. I know that that's been something that we've talked about here in the past. So, yeah, just looking at it, I mean, outside of his COVID year in Cincinnati, it might be his worst year of his career, but the other numbers outside of his batting average were very strong that year when you consider that he hit 225. So he somehow finished the year with 27 doubles and 17 homers. Man, just looking at his stuff, he had a 96 OPS plus in his first season in Phillies red pinstripes. And he only had 13 homers that year. Played a little bit less games, but he had an injury for a little bit that he dealt with. Overall, actually, ended up having a decent season after a really slow start. This year, kind of the opposite. Got out to a decent start and then really just fell off a cliff. He had like a month or so where he looked really strong later in the season, but really not anything to write home about. Anyway, what I was trying to get to is that the conversation so far has been, we've heard a lot about, is Bryce Harper elite anymore? Is he the guy? Well, one thing that Zalecki did a deep dive on, and his Bryce's agent Scott Boras noted that that Harper's seeing a lot of pitches out of the zone, and because they don't have anybody super reliable behind him, his chase went up a little bit this year. The last two seasons, he's seen a ridiculous number of pitches outside of the zone. Last year, he was better at laying off of them than this year. This year may have been, whether it's the wrist and having a month off where he kind of it took him a while to get back in the zone. Who knows? But his expected numbers actually looked a little bit better this year than they did last year. So just taking a look, and again, you can find this on MLB.com, a nice little deep dive by Todd Zalecki. His expected batting average was 280 this season versus 267 last year, whereas those final numbers were actually a little flipped. His expected slug is 512 this season versus 474 last year. Expected WOBA 379 versus 357. WRC plus 131 versus 144, so a little better. Last season, average exit velocity, a little bit of a tick up this year. Hard hit rate, right around the same, 47.5 versus 48.2. Barrel rate actually higher, 12.3 versus 10.6. His strikeout rate went down a little bit. His walk rate stayed about the same, as 12.1 versus 12. Bat speed a little bit higher. But he saw only 43% of the time did he see a pitch in the zone. And then in the postseason, it went even lower. He ranked 83rd out of 84 players who saw a minimum of 50 pitches in the zone. 39% of pitches were in the zone in the postseason. That was 83rd out of 84 qualified players. The biggest problem there is that he's hitting third, and Phillies cleanup hitters this season posted a combined 720 OPS, which ranked 20th in baseball. So only 10 teams had a worse OPS from their from their cleanup spot than the Phillies did. And one thing that was really interesting, and I want to highlight this part, 20th out of 30 teams, that was their lowest ranking of any spot in the lineup. So you want to talk about, the bottom of the lineup struggled at times. You want to talk about the maybe Trey Turner's adjustment and JT, who hit fifth, who hit sixth, whatever. The spot where they ranked the worst was cleanup. And you talk about Nick Castellanos having one of the worst seasons of his career. JT Realmuto, who's just not the same guy. He did turn it on after July and maybe a little bit into June. I forget exactly the numbers. I'm going to take a look at his splits when he really started to pick it up. But Realmuto not having a elite offensive season, maybe a little bit better than you would have expected, but he hit fourth a lot. Bohm hit fourth a lot and had an uncharacteristically down year. I think he had was one of the league leaders in doubles last season. His doubles were down significantly this year, which is very surprising to me that this guy's a doubles machine. He's an average machine. He uses the entire field, but just wasn't getting the doubles the same way this season. Again, he did not play nearly as much. He only played in 120 games, had 100 less plate appearances than he did last season when he was an all-star. He did hit 287 with a 331 on base and a 409 slug, but that's coming off of a 448 slug and a 437 slug the season prior. So he had, in 2022, he had 24 doubles and 13 homers. 2023, he had 31 doubles, 20 homers, his only 20 homer season in his career. Last season, 44 doubles, 2 triples, and 15 homers. He was an extra base hit machine, hit a 448 slug from a guy who's not known to have slug, but those doubles will get that number up there. And then all of a sudden this year, 18 doubles, 11 homers. I think the doubles, even if he plays those extra 20 plus games that he missed from last season, I don't see the doubles going up significantly. Obviously a little bit, he probably breaks 20, gets close to 25 homers. Maybe he's closer to that 15 range. You're likely looking at a guy who's going to hit 15 homers a season. He's not going to be an elite power guy, but that's not his game. And it's funny, one of the things that fans talk about a lot needing on this club is a guy who can hit the ball everywhere and a guy who can spray the field and take advantage and use what the pitchers give you instead of trying to do a specific thing. And then they want to trade Alec Bohm, which to me is insane. He is literally the definition of what everybody thinks is missing on this team is he hits the ball everywhere. He uses the full field. He does not strike out a lot. He's really good with runners in scoring position. To me, it's a no-brainer to keep this guy right where he is. And I think that if he were to bat fourth all season and not miss some time, that would be a big jump for this team. I think one thing that, even if they end up bringing back Kyle Schwarber, is I think you need to reconsider where Bryce Harper is in this lineup. So we talked about how they don't have the OPS numbers. JT and Alec are not guys who do a ton of walking. Nick Castellanos, not a guy who does a ton of walking. They talked in the offseason last year about maybe having Kyle Schwarber hit fourth. They ended up going with him at 2 and Bryce at 3. I would have liked to have seen it the other way around, personally. I know they both have big walk numbers, but I think with Harper's additional average and his propensity to hit the ball over the field a little bit more than Kyle has traditionally, although he had a good season doing so last year, I think that Bohm is a guy who could slide into that middle of the lineup, and it may not be automatic protection, but if Bryce goes, okay, look, I'm more than willing to take the walk and let this guy who can hit 35 plus doubles and 15 plus homers, I'm going to let him do what he does. Then you're adding pressure to both the defense and the pitcher. And I think that he would never come out and say it. His agent would never come out and say it. But one of the things that stuck out to me was Boris talked about that stat of only seeing pitches in the zone at a 43% rate this season. That is the fewest of the 532 qualified players, by the way, this season. 43% of the time, fewest number of pitches seen in the zone. Boris said to Zielecki, that's the stat. In other words, it would help Harper if they had a slugger hitting behind him in the lineup. And he said, you put gas in the tank and the Harpari, meaning the Ferrari, works, which is such a ridiculous quote. sounds exactly like what an agent would say, but he's right, right? Is that if you have a guy who cannot see pitches in the zone because of how dangerous he is, then you need to put someone behind him who's just as dangerous. And I think that putting Harper in front of Kyle Schwarber, maybe Schwarber being in front of Harper is a lot of the reason why Schwarber was that good this season. But I think that flipping those two and having Harper that second behind Trey Turner, who did a great job of setting the table this season, I think that could be nice if they end up bringing back Kyle Schwarber. Well, bringing back Kyle Schwarber is going to be costly. Right now, he signed a 4-year deal that I think he was making under $20 million a season. I think it was about 18. I'm going to take a look so I don't sound like an idiot. But where is it? There we go. Kyle Schwarber, yeah, he made like just under 20. It was like 19.7. My guess is that he ends up in the like the 25 to $35 million range. You're probably talking around 30 million a season. Something that they do a good job of, the comparable players. So they added Freddie Freeman, George Springer, Marcus Semien, and Matt Chapman. Now, obviously he plays a little bit different than all these guys. Springer, an outfielder who was a center fielder at the time. He signed a 6-year deal. Freddie Freeman, MVP, coming off he signed a 6-year deal at his age 32 season. Marcus Semien signed a 7-year deal at age 31. Matt Chapman. See, now all those guys played very good defense on top of being elite hitters, and that's the big difference for Schwarber, is that he is a DH basically exclusively at this point. However, there are some comps that we could do. So taking a look at some DHs in the past, I believe it was J.D. Martinez. I'm going to look it up just to make sure. J.D. Martinez's contracts. Let's take a look at what he ended up signing, because it was like a 5-year, $120 million deal, I believe. And he was a similar age when he signed. He may have been a little bit younger than Schwarber, but he was on his way to being a full-time DH at that time. So I think that that's a good comp. Let's take a look. Yeah, when he signed with the Red Sox, it was a 5-year, $110 million deal, and that was back in 2018. Now, contracts have jumped significantly since then. Schwarber coming off of the best season of his career, I could see a 4-year, 120. You're talking about $30 million a season, maybe 5 years, 150, 5 years, 130, maybe, to keep some of the AAV down, just to get that 5th year in. But then you're talking about having a guy who exclusively plays DH for the next 5 seasons. And I don't know if they want to do that, knowing that, although maybe he's not there in 5 years, Bryce Harper has needed some time on the IL over the last couple seasons, and to be able to spell him a little bit in that DH spot would be valuable to the Phillies. So we've talked a little bit about Harrison Bader and what that looks like. I could see him coming back. I don't think he comes back on that option, though. You're probably talking about a 3-year deal. I don't think teams would go much further than that. Maybe 2 years with a vesting option. I think Kyle Schwarber, obviously they want to bring him back. I think fans, the front office, he is the outspoken, the vocal leader of the team. I know I talked a little bit about JT earlier being the guy who manages the pitching staff, and he's the captain on the field when they're playing defense as the catcher, as being an elite catcher as he is. Bryce Harper is the public figure of the team, but when you need somebody day in and day out grabbing that microphone and speaking about the club, Kyle Schwarber has done that, especially since Rhys Hoskins left after the 2022 season. He has been that guy for the last 2 years. And then, obviously this is a question for the front office, not for fans, but what would he look like? What would it look like if he were to, what would it look like if JT wasn't there anymore? It's always an interesting question. I'd be curious to figure that out. We talked a little bit about Alec Bohm, what his role on this team will be. Well, one of the reasons that we talked about him is because a lot of people have been interested in this guy right here. So comment from Evan Conboy. How do you feel about bringing in Bregman, bringing in power and great right-handed bat behind Harper? I agree. I think that would be a good look. maybe he'd be willing to play. He's played left field in the past. He's a Gold Glover at third base. He's played shortstop in a pinch. I'm sure he'd be more than willing to play where he needs um, to play with the right team. I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of people interested. I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Dodgers make a big run at him. I know that the Red Sox are interested in bringing him back. I know that the Tigers are interested in looking at him and a reunion with his former manager. It's a guy with a long history of postseason success, great glove at third base, brings a lot of the pop that Bohm doesn't necessarily bring. Although this season, age 31 season, played a little bit less than Alec Bohm, but still Bohm didn't play a full season either. In 114 games, 18 homers, 28 doubles. So more doubles than Bohm, but similar numbers to what Bohm has given you. And he's less expensive. You have one more year of control. And you'd have to find a place for him to go. So the question would be, is he a DH? Is he an extra infielder? Does he play first and Bryce DHs? Do you trade him for somebody? There's going to be people who out there who want a bat. And do you feel like Alex Bregman is the guy who should fill in that hole? It'll be interesting to see, that's for sure. I want to take a look at let's take a look at Boston and what his projections are on SportRack. So let's take a look. Market value, again, take all this with a grain of salt, but market value, they view him as a 4-year, $110 million, about $27 million a season. If you hop over to phillysportsnetwork.com, our guy Matt Watson did a nice little breakdown of what it's if you go to metrophiladelphia.com and then go to our Phillies section, rebrand for Philly Sports Network. We're now Metro Philadelphia Philly Sports Network. Our guy Matt Watson, one of our team leaders over there covering all the Phillies, he did a little bit of a breakdown talking about the value coming off, value that'll likely increase. So just looking at, they have about $82 million in flexible spending if you're only looking at the contracts coming off the books. That being said, based on projections for players who are currently arbitration eligible and guys who already have escalators in their contract, like Sanchez makes more money next year. Alvarado makes more money. Bohm and Luzardo and Sosa and Duran and Stott and Marsh are all arbitration eligible. If you go by their projections, you're talking about another, not even including Harrison Bader, you're talking about another $55 million increase in salary. So it's 82 coming off 55. That's $26 million that you really have to mess around with. Of course, if you trade out Bohm and bring in Bregman, then it's probably another 15 to 20. But yeah, those are things you have to consider, right? They already said they're not going to be a $400 million payroll. Well, you don't have that much money to play with unless other changes are made, unless they feel like we've maximized what Jesus Luzardo can provide, and let's get rid of him and bring in something. I don't know what else they could potentially do to keep the value of some of these guys low and stay under a threshold unless they make some significant changes. One thing they could look to do, they could look to trade Nick Castellanos, and I would need somebody with a little bit more knowledge on how payroll works in baseball to confirm for me. But if they were to say buy out 15 of the 20 million owed to Nick Castellanos, is all of that counting toward, is the 20 million or the 15 that they would owe him, is that all counted towards this year's payroll, or can they split that out because it's not technically the player's not on their roster anymore? Can they kind of make an agreement with whatever team takes him where they could spread that money out and make it be less of an impact? Maybe you could get creative with some of the contracts coming in if they want to bring back Schwarber, and they could do some deferred money similar to what the Dodgers have done so well and other teams have done in the past with big contracts. Could you do some deferred money to bring your guy back in? But one of the biggest problems is that if you bring back Kyle Schwarber, you had a great season this year, and you're still missing that 4 hole. So even bringing back Kyle Schwarber, you still need that right-handed bat. And if JT Realmuto is not going to be the same guy, and if if people aren't confident that Alec Boehm can fill that 4 hole well with a full healthy season, you're looking at having to get creative. And if that means taking a lot of the money from Nick Castellanos' contract, and it means taking a lot of the money from Taijuan Walker's contract and finding ways to split that out, or to agree to a buyout and defer the payments to the guy. Maybe that could be something where you could buy out Nick and agree to pay him $5 million a year for the next 4 years instead of $20 million all at once. How does that impact your tax bill and your payroll overall? That is above my pay grade at the very least, so something to consider. But Alex Bregman would be a very interesting add. Again, he's an elite glove at the corner, but you're talking about getting rid of a guy who's relatively inexpensive and under team control in Alec Boehm, who likely will only see a small increase, who's worked his tail off to get better on the defensive end. And if he plays anything like he did in 22 and 23, it is an elite bat. That's an elite bat, man. Not everything is about power. If you're hitting 285 with 40 doubles and 15 to 20 homers, that's an elite bat. And especially for a guy who does very well with runners in scoring position, as he has in his career. With runners in scoring position in his career, he hit 307 with a 355 on base and a 442 slug. With men on in general, 293, 338, 439. The best his numbers look are when things get tougher, right? His numbers jump up significantly when men are on base. With a runner on third, 323 with a 419 slug. I mean, he does what he has to do to drive runners, and I think Alec Boehm is a guy who comes back no matter what. So, I think it's worth a conversation about Bregman, but you have to get very creative at that point. You have to get creative when it comes to salary, when it comes to what to do with Alec Boehm. Do you trade him and a prospect for an elite pitcher? And now you're a little bit more comfortable allowing Ranger Suarez to walk away. A lot of people assume that Suarez will be gone. SportRack has his estimate market value at 6 years, 161, which is like a $28 million deal. But the way pitchers get paid, especially elite starting pitching, which Ranger Suarez is, you're talking, I mean, I'd be stunned if he made less than $30 million a season. Absolutely. Unless it's like a really long deal to drive the AAV down, right? If they go like a 7-year deal for Ranger Suarez, how old is he now? I think he's 31. Let's take a look. He'll be entering his age 30 season next season. So, maybe you sign a 7-year deal and see what happens. I don't know what. Regardless, I don't think it's a guarantee that he's gone, because you saw this season how important starting pitching depth was. But just looking at like comparable players, right? So looking again at that SportRack, his statistical comparisons, you're talking about a similar deal to what Max Fried or Corbin Burns or Carlos Rodon signed recently. Garrett Crochet, even, you're talking about guys in that range. So 27 mil on average, maybe. I don't. What did Max Fried sign for? Let's see. Max Fried signed for 20. Yeah, I mean his average comes out to 27 a season. Okay, so maybe, and he was 31 in that first year of the contract. So maybe 27 is not a bad way to look at it. Fried, I thought that he got paid pretty well. So maybe 27 mil is a pretty strong number. Carlos Rodon didn't look like people expected him to, and he signed a significant deal. Garrett Crochet was incredible this year. He signed a significant deal. So we'll see what Ranger ends up getting, but I'd be stunned if it wasn't 28 plus. I still think 30 is the benchmark, but again, maybe if you go an extra year, you can pull some of that AAV down, similar to what they did with what the Phillies did themselves with Bryce Harper. The Rodon deal averaged out to 27 a season. They did 22 in the first year and then a little over 27 every other year. Uh, let's see, averaging 28 a season for the Crochet deal. But he was a lot younger, 27 in his first season. Um, yeah, I mean the Corbin Burns contract, he's 32 in the first year of that deal. Excuse me, 31 in the first year of the deal, and then he can opt out. Um, he's got 4 years, 96 million sitting on the table. But again, that was like a 30+ million dollar deal. So I think in my head, I'm thinking more the Corbin Burns style, but maybe he goes that max free to. I just look at it as elite level left-handed pitching is rough to come by, and there's two guys on the market. It's Framber Valdez and it's Ranger Suarez. And with Scott Boras being Rangers agent, he's a guy who's going to push for the biggest dollar. And I would imagine, again, maybe it's a 7-year deal to bring the AAV down, but I think him getting a lot. So yeah, I think a lot of people would love to see Ranger back, Evan, and that's a good point. With the tough part is, Andrew Painter never made his way to the majors. I think a lot of people wrote that in pen instead of penciling it in. I think that he's a guy who still needs to grow. He's still recovering from Tommy John. Everybody assumed that he would be have the rocket strapped to his back right when he was supposed to make the roster before getting injured. But with him not making it, and you're really not sure on the progress there, Mick Abel now out the door, no clear prospects. Zach Wheeler probably not starting the season, and he may never be the same guy again. So you're talking about Wheeler, Sanchez, Nola coming off of the worst year of his career, and Luzardo. And then beyond that, it's if Painter's ready, great. If not, what are you going to do? Does Taijuan Walker start the year in the rotation again, or do you find a way to buy him out of his contract and deal with the fact that that's a sunk cost, and can you spread that out via a buyout? And then again, you have to consider that they don't want to be a $400 million payroll team with all the tax. They've been in that tax 3 years in a row. So how do you go about approaching the offseason? I'd be really curious to see what a lot of people think. So make sure you're giving us a follow here on Phillies Sports Network, whether it be on X or Blue Sky or Instagram at Philadelphia SN, whether it's whether it's one of the individual writers, myself at Kyle Fisher 45, you can give us a follow there. But yeah, I think that it's going to be tough to determine what these guys should do, because you need another bat. Okay, well, before you get another bat, you got to figure out the elite 58 homer season that you just had. Is that guy coming back? Well, we're not sure. Okay, well, are you going to prioritize him or another bat? And what does another bat mean if you don't have him in it? Okay. All right. Well, Zach Wheeler's not going to start the season. Taijuan Walker might have to start in the rotation. Andrew Painter's not ready yet. Jesus Luzardo just pitched the most innings of his career. Chris Sanchez pitched the most innings of his career. Oh, and we have this guy who's also an elite performer walking out the door. Do we prioritize spending money on him to protect the rotation? And can we afford to sign two bats, let alone the one of them being the guy that's walking out the door already, if we do so? So it's going to be, despite the fact that they want to bring back the same people, it's going to be a really, really tough decision. Yeah, I just don't know what the right move is. I think that you can win with one or the other, but I think that needing both is a tough position to be in, especially when you have this much money on the books already, knowing that you have the need for a starting pitcher and you're assuming that Wheeler will come back fine and that Andrew Painter will be ready to start the season. But we know what assuming with pitchers does. It doesn't make a lot of sense to do so, because everybody needs pitching. And if anything has been proven, is that you need depth. They barely survived this year, but I don't know, man. I don't know. Do they think a splash is necessary? Do they think they need to go out and get somebody who's nobody is expecting? And do they need to go out and get Kyle Tucker for a huge long deal to replace Kyle Schwarber? And then you're still in a position where you need a right-handed bat in the middle of that middle of that lineup. So could a Kyle Tucker push be in order for the Phillies? I don't know what his numbers are going to look like. That's a tough spot to be in, is to know that, like, you have one guy walking out the door, you have other needs, and then you also have this prized free agent out there that's been connected to you for 2 years because of the struggles you've seen in the outfield. We're talking about a team that signed Kyle Schwarber and Nick Castellanos in the same offseason with the idea that they would split time between the outfield and DH. And then you had your other corner outfielder being Bryce Harper. Well, before either one of those contracts is done, you're now in a position where Bryce Harper has to be your everyday first baseman, and you need other people to step up and play the outfield. And that just has not happened the way that you would hope. If Bryce Harper never needed to go to the outfield, you're probably not even talking about Kyle Tucker. The Kyle Schwarber experiment seems like the obvious one to move forward with because it's worked so well. Tucker is the younger player. He has extensive experience in the postseason, performing well in the postseason. He gets MVP votes every single full season that he has. He's an all-star every year. He's a Silver Slugger candidate every year. He did have a down season compared to his two final seasons in Houston. He's entering his age 29 season, but he would fill two needs if the Phillies were to go after him as opposed to Kyle Schwarber. And that is that he plays the outfield and that he would step into that left-handed bat in the middle of the lineup to complement Bryce Harper a little bit more. He would probably be your 2 or 3 hitter with Schwarber taking the other. And then, you're still in a position where you need a right-handed bat. Do they get really creative and think like, oh, well, maybe we just push Bryce to the DH, and do we go get one of these first basemen who are available, like Josh Naylor? Or do they pull the trigger on a huge guy like Pete Alonso, who's probably going to get a 6 or 7 year deal? So it's, the tough part is predicting what Tucker's going to get. He had 2 really, really bad months in the middle of this season, only hit 266 on the year. But everybody knows the potential. So, I think that everybody assumed, or at least a lot of people assumed, that he was going to get 10 years, $400 million. And now you're talking about maybe 11 years, $350 to cut down on the AAV. He's still going to be in someone's organization for a long time, but did he cost himself enough money that pulls the Phillies back into the conversation? That I just don't know. The only way that they could go out and get a guy like him, I think, is if they were to get off of a lot of this money and figure out ways to not have it all hit at once, or backload Tucker's contract so you can afford to accept the fact that you have $38 million of dead money in a Walker and a Castellanos contract being bought out on the books, and then you just go low 1 year and then high the rest of the years for Tucker. Basically, the message that I'm trying to get out here at the end of the day is that it's going to take some creativity for this team to end up right back where people want them to be, and that's pushing for a World Series. And again, untimely hitting aside, running into a juggernaut aside, this is a team that has those aspirations and should have those aspirations the entire time that Bryce Harper is under contract in Philadelphia. You don't sign a guy to a 13-year deal and then sign another guy to an 11-year deal if you don't think that you're going to be around for a long time competing. You don't sign a starting pitcher to a 7-year deal in Aaron Nola and then sign another starting pitcher to $45 million a season and then sign your young starting pitcher in Chris Sanchez if you don't think you're going to compete for the next few seasons. So it's, your core is still there, but part of that core is walking out the door in JT Realmuto and Kyle Schwarber, and it's projecting who the most important piece is to keep around. To me, that is an interesting question. Of the Phillies free agents, who is the most important for them to keep around? And I think that people are going to be a little surprised by what I say, But I think the number one priority of the three main guys is JT Realmuto. And that's a guy who I text my brother earlier this season and said he might be washed. The JT Realmuto experiment on offense might be done. He's a great defender, a great leader, but if he can't hit, then what are we doing? And I think that with his resurgence in the second half, I don't think he's all of a sudden back to being the elite offensive performer he was before, but he showed me enough, and the way that he's handled this pitching staff over the years, he's shown me enough that he needs to be brought back. And I think that his expected contractual value, let's take a look at what the contracts estimate our guy JT Realmuto making, because that's going to be huge. Take a look here. JT Realmuto, what's he look like as far as projections are concerned? Yeah, I'm not finding it, of course. Where is it? Let's go here. Oh, there it is. Okay. So, yeah, again, people may overpay because of his history and how well he handles staffs, but the projections is about $13 million a season. So if you could bring him back for, let's say, 12 and a half, 10 with a vesting option for the third year, or you just sign him to 3 years and have that last season be a little bit less, because they don't. The tough part with JT Realmuto is you do not have a viable option behind him, right? It's Garrett Stubbs is a fine backup. Rafael Marchand is a fine backup. Neither one of them screams starter. And then you'd be talking about, what do you do from there on the Phillies? What do you do at catcher long term? I guess you could play those guys, but is that what you want to do? You want to play? You want your catchers to be those two guys? You want your catchers to be Garrett Stubbs and Rafael Marchand? I don't think that that's what you want to see. So let's take a look at some of the. One thing that would be interesting is, again, I think he should be the priority. I think that bringing him back and the way that he's been able to manage this young pitching staff, and guys, including Luzardo, have said how important he has been to their development. I think that almost takes priority over everything else. And I know that you already need a bat, so you definitely need two bats if Kyle Schwarber walks. But I think that you need to prioritize the way you've gotten there the last couple seasons is elite starting pitching. And I think to keep it elite, you need not only Caleb Cotham, but you need JT Realmuto on that field as well. The options, if you don't, you're talking about a Christian Vazquez, Danny Jansen. William Contreras, maybe, but he has a club option. He's not going to be available. Victor Caratini, maybe you can plug that hole with two guys, but do you want to go, Elias Diaz and Gary Sanchez, or do you want to go Danny Jansen and Victor Caratini? Christian Vazquez and Victor Caratini? I don't know if that even, I don't know. Just that doesn't jump out to me, right? Vazquez and Caratini, neither one is known as an elite defender. Maybe Caratini, those two guys together, their estimated market value is like $3 million a season. So maybe you want to pull off something like that. Maybe they make a decision on him later and determine okay, how much money do we have left? Do we get him or do we go up somebody else? But to me, I think he's the priority. You have other bats. I love Kyle Schwarber. I love everything he's done for the town. He's such a great guy. I love everything he's done for that clubhouse. He is the voice of the team. But I think JT Realmuto is too important to this club for him to not be the priority. So I think 3 years, what did I say earlier? 12 and a half the first 2 years, maybe 3 years, 40, maybe 3 years, 36, 35, 12 and a half, 10, something like that, 15, 7 and a half. Or it's that math doesn't work out, but 15, 15, 15, 7, 3 years, 35 to 40, somewhere in that range. I think you can probably bring him back for that. And again, if you front load it, you're getting his value. And I would want to keep it. If you sign him for 3 years, I want to keep him here the whole contract. But it's an easier pill to swallow if you have that set up, and then you can have somebody else be backloaded beyond that contract to kind of make things up. Dombrowski's a guy who's been creative in the past. So I don't see a reason why he wouldn't be creative now. But yeah, it's I don't know. People listening out there, do you think that okay, so Alex, 3 years, 36, get it done? I think that 3 years in like the 35 to $40 million range, maybe 45, but that's about as far as I would push it. 15 a season. I think you're looking more like 15, 15, 10, 15, 15, 12. So, again, like a 35 to $37 million deal. They need a bat, but like if you're forcing me to, Johnny, I was about to address this. So if I have to bring back, if I can only pick one of the three guys to prioritize, I think I'm prioritizing Real Muto because there's other more flexible hitting options out there. And maybe none of them are a perfect fit, but you're talking about a guy who is only going to fit one spot in Schwarber, whereas I feel like Real Muto, he does so much beyond just being a good catcher, being a decent hitting catcher. He does so much work with that pitching staff. And Luzardo said that he's basically another coach out there, that he's basically the manager on the field. Cotham has said it's like having another coach. And I think that you're not going to find what he brings anywhere else. Maybe Stubbs is a great leader, but I don't know if he's going to bring to the team overall what Real Muto brings. And I think that you're looking at some challenges. So if you're telling me I have all the time in the world to attack these three guys, if say they're all going to sign in February, and a lot of people have been signing later, say they're all going to sign in February, so you have time to figure it out. In order of priority, I'm going after JT first to see if I can get him to sign in January instead of February, and then I'll go after the other two. That's me personally, though. I think that a lot of people are willing to sacrifice catcher a little bit if you can get an elite defensive catcher who maybe doesn't hit all that well, or you can get two guys like that and maybe do a platoon at a much more inexpensive price. Your priority would be Kyle Schwarber, and that makes a lot of sense. I just think that there's other people out there who can. I don't think you're going to get 55 plus home runs from Kyle Schwarber every season, right? I don't think you're going to get 45 plus home runs from him every season for the next 4 or 5 years, whereas you could get similar production overall from Kyle Tucker or Pete Alonso or someone like that. Now you could get your follow-up could be, well, are you prioritizing them or are you prioritizing JT Real Muto? I'm just looking at their three free agents. Their three top free agents, those three guys, because I know there's Kepler and Romano and other guys involved. But the top three guys, the guys who are going to be sought after by a lot of teams, if I had to pick one to start with, I'm going after JT Real Muto to try and bring him back. Now, maybe he turns around and says, guys, I want to be back. Go prioritize the other pieces and talk to me in a little bit. In that case, you're going Kyle Schwarber. But I think that what Real Muto brings to that pitching staff and how highly they all speak of him and the pitching coaches speak of him and the manager speaks of him, that is what has gotten that team to the dance every single year. It's been the thing that has been strong every single year in the postseason for them. And you need kind of a reset in the field. You need a reset in the outfield, and I wouldn't be afraid to do different things with the other guys. But I think that Real Muto needs to be back, and just based on the limited amount of options, maybe they could get creative and get. We talked about if you bring in Bregman, do you trade Alec Boehm? Maybe you could trade Alec Boehm to a team that has a logjam. The Royals have some highly touted prospects. The Mariners have some highly touted catching prospects, so maybe you could, figure out a trade to bring in one of those guys, whether it's a prospect and unload some money, or whether it's two prospects, or whether it's Boehm. Who knows? They're going to have to get all of this. Speaks to the fact of what I said at the beginning. They're going to have to get creative this offseason, plain and simple. I just want to run through kind of the Phillies roster before we wrap things up and do a little should they stay or should they try and get a little creative here. So let's just look at the roster. So we talked about it already. I think I mean, when you talk about JT Realmuto, I think he needs to be back. He's maybe the top priority for me. I understand if you go somewhere else first, but I think that his impact on the game overall is really important. So I think he stays. The Bryce Harper, he stays. That's no question to me. Uh, Sanchez, Luzardo, Wheeler, Nola, they all stay. I don't see them trading Nola. Uh, that would be a lot of money. I mean, again, they talked about maybe you have to get creative and trade a big money contract, but with the season he just had, that's just not going to happen. I don't think anybody's going to give you. Someone will give you pennies on the dollar for him. Whereas I think he can come back quickly. So I think you're talking about those four guys coming back, and then from there, it's do you bring back Suarez? Do you default to Andrew Painter? Do you sign a veteran? I think that could be the way that they go: is sign a veteran or two to a 1 or 2 year deal, shorter contracts, but similar to what you did with Taijuan Walker. You're bringing in someone to support the rotation instead of headline the rotation. So bringing in 1 or 2 pieces like that could add some value. And a guy like Chris Bassett, who's going to be pitching in the World Series, he's a guy who could be a target. Let's just look like Chris Bassett. He'll be age 36, 3.77 ERA. If he's your 5 starter to start the season, obviously that's something that they could attack. Outfield, you want to get really creative. Could just looking at the World Series, could Michael Conforto be a guy that they go out and get? He doesn't move the needle for me, but he's an option. And again, okay, so getting back to the Phillies roster, the bullpen, I think most of those guys are maybe, depending on the deal, you could move a guy, but you're going to have Duran, Strahm, Kerkering, Banks. You're going to have those 4 guys back. You're going to have Alvarado back. And then, Robertson's leaving. Walker's in the final year of his contract, whether he's in the bullpen rotation or they figure out something to free up that money. Who knows? Walker Buehler, a free agent. Who knows what happens with him? If he wants to come back, maybe they could bring him back as that fill-in guy. He may cost a little bit of money, but maybe he could be a 1 year deal. Going into the infield, you're looking at Harper, Bohm, Stott, and Turner. Turner's going to come back and be the everyday shortstop. Stott is somewhere where they could get creative, right? You do have Sosa. They like Sosa. They like Kemp. They like Wilson. They said that Kemp could be a guy who sees a lot more playing time this year. If they get the right offer that involves Bryson Stott to get an outfielder or an additional starter, maybe that can help fill some of the gap of these guys leaving. But I would lean towards him coming back. On the flip side, I would lean towards Edmundo Sosa coming back. Similar reason, I think Stott has the higher trade value. So if they do decide to include Stott in trade talks, Sosa could step in and be your second baseman to start the year. But I just think that Stott, with his elite glove, and we know that he has been a guy who can hit all over the field in the past. So could he be that guy again? Turner's going to be your everyday shortstop, put in so much work to turn his defense into a positive this season. He'll be back at the shortstop position. And then third base, Alec Bohm. That could be a place where they look to change. Could they go after the Japanese star who's coming over, being posted this year? They have not signed anybody straight out of Japan in the past, so that seems unlikely. But could they get creative with Alex Bregman, or maybe some other potential trade options, someone like a Eugenio Suarez if he gets moved again? Brandon Marsh is an interesting character. I think he will be back. He's a guy who can play everywhere. I don't know if he'll ever be an everyday player, but he hit over 300 since coming back from an injury after going 0 for in April. He was one of the best hitters on the team, and he mostly faced right-handed pitching, but you are mostly going to face right-handed pitching, especially starters, just because the nature of more people being right-handed. So Brandon Marsh is a valuable piece. Could you get creative and include him in a trade? Sure. I think it's more likely that he returns than Max Kepler. Thanks, but see ya. He's probably on his way out. Harrison Bader, I don't think there's a guarantee he comes back, but I would like to see him back. But if the most likely trade candidate, I think, is Nick Castellanos. Despite the money, I think they're just going to look to move on after some of the issues and controversies that have surrounded him. Whatever he said to the manager really rubbed a lot of people the wrong way back in June down in Miami. So he seems like a situation where it's like, get what you can for him and move on. Even if I liked the guy every time I spoke to him, I think he's a I don't think he's a problem in the clubhouse, but he's a guy who seems like an obvious case to move on from. And then they hinted at, Justin Crawford hit over 300 last year at AAA. They seem to have him penciled into one of the corner spots. But again, that not being a center fielder like they thought he might be, you still have some moves to make at center field. You still have some moves to make in the outfield. I mean, based on what I just said, you're talking about one of the regular contributors in the outfield returning. I know that they have Weston Wilson and Otto Kemp under contract, but I don't know if you really Wilson, you might trust him a little bit out in the outfield, but Kemp, they didn't really show a propensity to trust him out in the outfield. He played more third or second when he needed it. Wilson played left, second, and first when he needed it. So again, you're talking about maybe a platoon in left with Marsh and Wilson, a starting right fielder, and Justin Crawford, and then you're figuring it out in center field, or you go Marsh in center and then figure it out in the corners for someone like Kyle Tucker. So it's going to be an interesting offseason for the Phillies. We're going to do a deeper dive into what everything means, especially once the offseason wraps up. Once the offseason kicks off when the World Series wraps up. Thank you. We're going to do a deep dive. We're going to try and get a show on with everybody, and we're going to do a focus on positional groups. Once we have a little bit more information on projected contracts and what guys might be looking for, I'll be interested to see what that looks like. One guy, we talked a little bit about who could be available from the World Series, with the World Series starting tonight. We mentioned Chris Bassett. Max Scherzer is a guy who will be available as well. I don't know if he's going to want to come down. He could retire. He may sign another one-year deal. If they win the World Series, he may go out at age 41 and call it a day. Sir Anthony Dominguez, a reunion with him could be good. He's been having a good season out there for Toronto. Let's see what Sir Anthony Dominguez looks like as far as stats and projected contracts. Sir Anthony had a 3.16 ERA this year. Not bad. And after the trade from Baltimore, a little bit better, a 300, a 3 flat ERA after having a 3.24. In Baltimore, his projected numbers were a lot better. Strikeouts were down a little bit in Toronto, but I think he pitched more effectively. Yeah, he did. He pitched more effectively overall. So a little more wild. They got him under control a little bit. It'd be interesting to see him come back. And then Kershaw and Vesia will likely be. Well, Kershaw's retiring. Vesia will likely be back to the Dodgers. You could see guys to watch. Again, Michael Conforto, he's been bad, so it would be another one-year prove-it deal a la Max Kepler, but he hit 199 with a 637 OPS. I don't know about that. And again, you need a right-handed bat somewhere in here. He's a left-hander, so we'll see what happens there. But it could be a one-year prove-it deal like they did with Merrifield or Kepler or Harrison or you name them. They've had a look at them. There's a guy who there's one guy out there who I think would be an interesting fit. You'd have to get a little creative. You have a few guys like this. He wouldn't be a replacement for Kyle Schwarber. He wouldn't be a replacement for a big bat. But Kike Hernandez, a guy who kind of became like the young lion to Chase Utley after Utley got traded out to the Dodgers. He's played in 96 postseason games to date, and he's hitting 282 with an 864 OPS. The guy turns it on in the postseason, and he's a solid player during the regular season, but he plays like every position. So let's look at his numbers and see. Again, he's going to be a free agent. Had a down overall season, right? Hit 203. He's a career 236 hitter. He hit 203 last year. This past season, 229 the season before. He's got a 707 OPS career, but he hasn't had an OPS above 7 since 2021. He had a 786 OPS, which was actually a huge surprise. 35 doubles, 20 homers when he was with Boston for that little bit of time. Went Uh, Dodgers for like 6 years, then Boston, then back to LA. But he's a guy who really turns it on. And again, he played everywhere over the last 2 seasons outside of catcher. So maybe if you view a Otto Kemp or a Edmundo Sosa as a potential trade target, or someone to include in a trade to improve elsewhere, maybe Kike could be a guy. So just to give you something on the way out to watch for the World Series, those are the guys who are going to be free agents: Vesia, Kike, uh, and our guy Michael Conforto, former Met. Excuse me. Let's take a look. Who else do they have any other free agents? I'm sure they do, but let's take a look just to make sure I'm not missing anybody. But if you want a deeper dive on all those guys, make sure you hop over to Philly Sports Network, MetroPhiladelphia.com, and look up the article by our guy Sean Nestor at Sean_Nestor on Twitter. Put out a nice article breaking down the people to watch. The I don't know why I didn't mention this. I think most people assume that he's going to be brought back. That's why. Bo Bichette will be a free agent, and he had a wonderful bounce back season. Market value is going to be high on him, but could he be a guy? He's similar to Trey Turner last season. Wasn't known for his glove. Is not known for his glove. Most people think he will be a second baseman or a third baseman long term. So he's a guy that if they wanted to break the bank a little bit and get another guy who sprays the ball all over the field, could Bichette be a guy that they target? So apologies that I didn't mention him earlier, but could Bo Bichette be a guy that they target? He's actually returning. He is on the roster for the World Series. He had a little bit of an injury, but he'll be back tonight for the start of the World Series. But just to take a look, right? He had a down season last season. He had a negative WAR for the only season in his career. He's had a negative WAR. He hit 225 last season. When he came back this year, hit 311 with 44 doubles and 18 homers. I'll take that all day, every day, no problem. An 840 OPS. He has a career 806, so maybe the 840 a little high. But he's a guy who put in a 3.4 WAR this season. Again, 44 doubles, that Alec Boehm type number, 18 homers. Depends on what you want to do with the lineup, but he could be a guy who hits in front of Bryce. So Trey, Bo, Bryce. If you want to go Bryce third, maybe he could hit third behind Bryce. If you like Bryce second, like myself. But yeah, it'll be interesting if you want to watch him. He could be. They said that he could play anywhere right now. Shortstop, second, DH if he needs to. Early September, he had a strain in his left knee. He is now back. So they've gotten this far without him, and he should be back in the lineup. Maybe not every game, maybe not every inning, but he will be back for the Blue Jays. Looking at the Dodgers free agents. Where are we with the Dodgers free agents? So we talk about Conforto. There is a guy like Kirby Yates who will be a free agent. Don't know if they run out the door to go get him. Miguel Rojas, again, it would be as a utility guy or a backup. I don't see him starting. Michael Kopech is an interesting one. So they avoided arbitration with him. He's scheduled to be a free agent this coming off season, and I want to take a look at Michael Kopech because I remember at one point it was him and Crochet out in Chicago, the White Sox. And the talk was you have two elite starters here, and he's basically been a bullpen piece the last 2 years. I think that he struggled a little bit his last year in Chicago. They decided to move him to the bullpen to see what he would do there. He pitched okay, but again, you're pitching in Chicago for the White Sox. How often are you going to look elite? You're not going to be in a position to win games a lot of times. A 4.74 ERA with Chicago in 2024, traded to the Dodgers for the stretch run. 24 games, he had a 1.13 ERA. He had a 2.45 ERA this season in just 14 games. He will be a free agent, and he has been a starter in the past. So maybe, depending on what his contract would look like, maybe he could be a guy who excuse me, yeah, maybe he's a guy who could be targeted as a guy who helps in the rotation while you wait for the recovery of Zach Wheeler or the you wait for Andrew Painter to prove that he's ready to take that step. So Kopech could be an option. Everybody else, I mean, the only other potential option would be if you wanted to go a little bit cheaper and he becomes a free agent, because that's a big if. He has a club option right now. But if the Dodgers have in the past spend on targets, not necessarily targeting positions of need, but just targeting players and deciding that they want to bring them in. So Muncy on a club option for $10 million, could he be a guy that ends up getting released? And could he be a Kyle Schwarber left-handed middle of the order bat replacement while you go spend a little bit more money on a guy like Pete Alonso or another right-handed hitter, for instance? So if you want to watch Muncy closely this season, he had a great second half of the season. He got some tests done, and he had a bad astigmatism, started wearing glasses, and took off. So I just love that people don't even put together man, I can't really see the ball that well. Oh man, I can see. Look at that. To me, that's still hilarious. But only 10 doubles to 19 homers. He's never been a huge doubles guy. He's always been a power guy. 36 homers 2 years ago in 2023. Plays an okay third base. He could play third or first or DH for you. So it gives you a little bit of flexibility, similar to what Alec Bohm will give you. He may cost more than Alec Bohm and is a lot older than Alec Bohm. So me personally, I'm probably sticking with Alec Bohm instead of going after Max Muncy. But if they do end up cutting him, he's another option out there to add some thump in the middle of the lineup, especially if you don't re-sign Kyle Schwarber. You don't want another lefty in the middle of that lineup. But yeah, he hit. So just to put it in perspective, he struggled a little bit in September, but he hit 194 in April, 250 in May, and then he hit 333 in June and 348 in August. He had a little bit of an injury in July, so he missed some time, but guy turned it on big time in the second half, and a lot of that came after he got that eye exam done, which is hilarious. So, yeah, guys, just appreciate everybody joining in. I know that we've had some time changes. We're going to go ahead and wrap things up. If you want to watch for those guys during the World Series kicks off. Dodgers at Toronto. Who's going to be on the mound for those guys tonight? Let's see. Tonight, 8 o'clock. Everything starts up in Canada. Oh, by the way, I doubt that anybody from Canada or anybody associated with the Blue Jays is listening right now. But if anybody out there listening has any connections with the Blue Jays, please reach out to me. I am trying to help a friend accomplish a goal. And as far as we are aware, he would be the only person in history to accomplish this goal. My guy, Reggie Duval Saint, Reggie the Beer Guy on Instagram. He is a beer vendor who has vended beer at every major league stadium. He has technically already vended at more than 30 stadiums. He vended, I believe he vended at Texas before they opened the new stadium. So he's been to both Rangers. He's been to Oakland before they closed down. He has vended at every single stadium. He did the Rickwood Field. He did the NASCAR Field. He did the Field of Dreams. He's been to all of these special events, and he's hit 29 of 30 professional stadiums. He's pitched in both the Rays major league and the minor league stadium that they played in this year. He vended at the minor league stadium out in Sacramento that Oakland played in this year. The only team he hasn't been able to vend for is Toronto, and it's related to temporary work visas and not being able to get approved for what could be 2 games. But I'm sure that there's got to be a way around this. This guy is so close to achieving a lifelong dream. So anybody who can help me out, I'd appreciate it. Put me in contact with the right people so I can help Reggie get in there. Maybe during the World Series, maybe not until next season. But I know that he would change his plans to get up there in a heartbeat if he could. So anything you could do, if you know anybody with the Blue Jays or you are related to anybody with the Blue Jays, let me know, because that would be really, really cool to get him in there and get that 30 out of 30 pro teams. That being said, World Series kicks off tonight, 8 p.m., you have Trey Yesavage on the mound. The young kid in his first year of professional ball. He was drafted in the first round last season, started at single A, low single A this year, and is now starting game 1 of the World Series. Wow. Kid has been an incredible riser. We'll see what happens. He is going up against Blake Snell, who has no big deal, a 0.86 ERA so far in the postseason, pitching like the elite starting pitcher that everybody knew he could be. Now with the protection that the Rays wanted to give him off, they're allowing him to go deep into games. They're allowing him to pitch his game and pitch his style, and it is working. He is pitching his butt off. So if you're a baseball fan, it all starts tonight. If you're a Phillies fan, make sure you keep an eye on those guys that we mentioned. If Conforto or Kike make it into the lineup, see what they do. Watch a little bit of Max Muncy and see if Sir Anthony does anything special for you. And if you were a big Jeff Hoffman fan, you'll see him at some point in the Toronto bullpen. All right, guys, I really, really appreciate the time today. We're going to go ahead and wrap things up. We're going to figure out our new schedule. We had to prioritize our new website, metrophiladelphia.com, where you can go to the sports section and find Philly Sports Network, Metro Philly Sports Network. And of course, we had to prioritize some mental health. I needed a week off. So we gave me a week off, but we'll be back all off season long to talk contracts, to talk with other members of our team. If you want to know those other members, make sure you give us a follow at Philadelphia SN. You can find me and all my coverage at Kyle Fisher 45. I'm going to be writing up a piece this next week, diving into what do the Phillies look like if they can't bring back any of their 3 major free agents. So what could the Phillies potentially look like next year if they want to stay under $400 million and they can't re-sign Kyle Schwarber, JT Realmuto, or Ranger Suarez? I'm going to hopefully break down 2 options, one with a big name and then a couple other pieces filled in, and then one with, here's kind of how we markedly improve across the board. So be on the lookout for that. Be on the lookout for everything that the guys over at Philly Sports Network have coming up, including Flipping the Birds every Tuesday night, 8 p.m. here on YouTube. Make sure you watch Corey Naito and the gang as they break down all things Eagles. And, of course, with the Flyers and Sixers finally kicking off, of course, we have plenty of content coming from that crew as well. I'll be contributing to the Sixers on some level as well, but we're still in Phillies season, even if the season is over for the players on the field. So make sure you keep it locked here on Philly Sports Network, on here, the YouTube channel for everything Alley Talk every single Friday. Here myself, I'll be hosting every single week. And if we do have a change in schedule, keep it locked into the socials and we'll let you know. Appreciate the love. Appreciate the comments. Yes, Johnny Fisher, I chose Realmuto over Kyle Schwarber as my priority, and I'm sticking to it until next time. We appreciate the love. We are here to talk nothing but ball, love ball, and love for each other. Appreciate you guys, and we'll catch you on next week's Alley Talk.